Hello, everyone. This is Deepak Pareek. So I've been in the sector for more than a decade, working on different part of agriculture ecosystem, all the way from grassroots level with the farmers, working with corporations, startups, farmers, governments, advising them at different layers to scale up implementation of agriculture technology solutions. In fact, I've been operating across global south from Western Africa all the way to Southeast Asia. So without further ado, I would like to just put across my presentation. Let me know once if you are able to see my screen. I hope you are able to see my screen. Just let me know once you are.
Yes. We can see.
Okay, that's good. So as you know that today's topic which have been allocated to me is data-driven decision to decide what to grow, when to grow, and typically how digital transformation is impacting agriculture. And all of us know that agriculture is one of a very critical sector when it comes to our everyday life. And we have seen that unfortunately for multiple decades, while the digital transformation of different industry has happened, whether we talk about banking or we talk about enterprise tech or when we talk about logistic transportation, governance, everywhere digital technology has played a very important role. But unfortunately, we have seen that that has not been case so far when it comes to agriculture, and that is for various reasons. But before we delve into how digitization is impacting agriculture, let us understand the sector a little bit. Uh, when we talk agriculture, not too many people get attracted to it for very simple reason. It is a problem of a farmer. It is a problem of a government. It is problem of XYZ. It's not my problem. But when we dovetail the agriculture that your food comes from agriculture, then suddenly it becomes a pressing problem for each of us. Because when we get up in the morning, we might be starting our day with maybe a cup of coffee, tea, or a glass of milk. Agriculture is involved. And at the same time, when we take our last meal in the late night, the dinner, again, we are engaged with the agriculture ecosystem. And multiple times across the day, we engage with agriculture. Whenever we eat something or when we drink something, the food and beverages, we'll find agriculture plays a very important role. Recently, actually, there have been a study which came out from the Food and Agriculture Organization, which talked about how the food insecurity in the world has increased. So we are having roughly close to 1 billion people in the world who are not getting the food they need to live a healthy life. And this is, I'm just talking about where those people who are having severe level of food insecurity, right? We are not even talking about people which are having partial level of food insecurity. Now if we add also the people with moderate or partial level of food insecurity, this 1 billion becomes 2.4 billion. And this is where actually if from roughly 8 billion people across the world, if close to 2.4 billion of them, they are food insecure, then this problem is far bigger than any one of us would have thought about it. Going forward, also, we see that this problem is not going to get solved immediately. While we have the global development goal of ensuring by 2030 we should be having zero hunger. But again, FAO says that by 2030 we still would be having close to 500 million people who would be hungry. Now, hungry is where we talk about people who don't have 2 square meal to even sustain their basic lives. We are not even talking about nutritional value. We are not talking about wellness, but basic hunger itself would be for close to 500 million people. And predominantly these people, they would be in Asia. So 55% of these hungry people happens to be in Asia, and another 37 odd percent in Africa. So within these two continents, we are talking about more than 90% of people who are hungry. And this is where the great challenge is. We would be adding roughly couple of billion people by 2050 and another couple of billion by 2100. So we would be having far more people to feed, and that changing the way we consume food, the type of food we consume, and majority of the world is seeing increase in the basic incomes, and hence their need for more protein, more fat. And if we go with those numbers, we are looking at by 2050, we need 60% more food than what we produce today. At the same time, we are also seeing that the impact of climate change. We have seen that for past 2 years in the wheat crop in India. This year, we have seen that in rice as well. So, for example, India, which used to produce close to 110 to 113 million metric tons of wheat, for continuously 2 years, we have produced less than 100 million metric tons. and that is because of the heat stress. Similarly, this year we have seen for rice, we might be seeing this year fall of productivity by between 10 to 13% of rice, just because of erratic rainfall. This shows that the climate change impact on agriculture is real. So while agriculture is definitely also one of the culprits of climate change because of the greenhouse gases it produces, but at the same time, we see that going forward, 8 to 10% reduction in agriculture productivity because of climate change. Now, what does that mean? That means that we need to cultivate twice the land which we are cultivating today to feed everyone by 2050. Now, that's not possible. So, what does it say is that simply that agriculture in current form or the practices being implemented in agriculture in current form are not sustainable to save the planet. Now, let's understand why the food system needs a fundamental transformation. So, over 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, while 2 billion people are overweight or obese. Similarly, 800 million people, as I said, they live below the poverty line and they have severe challenges of food insecurity. Agri-food sector represents 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and inversely, climate change threatens our food systems. The food sector accounts for 70% of water withdrawal, and now that is also a challenge which we are seeing back home in India. That in India, 164 district out of roughly 700 of them, they are having serious challenges when it comes to the water table. And going forward, we are already seeing that in Punjab and Haryana, which happens to be the paddy bowl of India, even in Chhattisgarh and eastern UP, the water table are falling drastically, and that is creating a lot of challenges when it comes to food security. At the same time, you see that the 500 million smallholder farmers across the world, they produce 80% of the food consumed in developing world. So unlike when we talk about corporatization of agriculture, where the few corporations can take care of the food security world, that's easier said than done. That's not happening because majority of the corporation, they might be engaged in commercial crops, not too much when it comes to ensuring the food security of the world. So the smallholder farmers, they are very critical clock if we want to ensure that the world we live in is food secure. Now in India also, when we talk about the India's food and agriculture, right, we need to feed close to 1.4 billion people. 800 million of them have serious food security challenges. We have got 130 million farming households in India depending upon farming, and 20% of them live below the poverty line of $1.9. This is twice the national average. So unfortunately, we have a scenario where those who are most important in ensuring our food security, they are having a very bad economics in their hand. 20% of them, they live below the poverty line. So it is very challenging for them to adopt new technology or spend for adoption of new technology and ensure higher or better productivity. Similarly, India produces close to 600 million metric tons of agriculture produce. Close to 55% of them is in grains, that is non-perishable, and remaining is perishable, which is having roughly $410 billion worth of economic value. We are exporting roughly $50 billion worth of food while importing 30 billion worth of agriculture produce. Now, these numbers are definitely going to change for this year. As we see, we have banned export of wheat as well as rice. So the export numbers are going to fall. And similarly, we have also seen the restriction being imposed on perishables like onion. So overall, we see that the export might fall. At the same time, we might also see a little bit of dip in imports for a very simple reason that previous year we had a good import of oilseed and vegetable oils, and hence we are having good buffers, and we might not need to import too much of oilseed, but we might see the challenge specifically in the grains and pulses. Pulses for sure, our import budget is gonna inflate substantially because we have not been able to produce some of the pulses, including the tuar or urad or pigeon pea or black mappe is what we lack substantially, and we might rely on that for imports. But there is always a silver lining in a black cloud, which is that India is a digital nation, and we are having among the cheapest and fastest internet, with close to 358 million people who are having access to internet, and 1.14 billion people have mobile connection. So digitally, we are a connected country and with a very low cost of access to internet, which is good news when we talk about adoption of digital technologies. So today, in case we want to ensure that there is food security for all by 2050, we need a truly sustainable agri-food system, which is data-driven, insightful, scalable, holistic, distributed, should be self-learning so that it can learn from its own mistake and improve. It should be transparent so that there is a fairness in the trade. It has to be real-time because unlike in the past when we used to have too much of historical data to make decision, today we need real-time information to take immediate data-driven decision making. especially when we have the title of this presentation itself, using digital technologies to enable farmer to decide when to grow, what to grow, and how to grow. We need real-time information. It has to be collaborative so that all the stakeholders, whether we are talking about those which are involved in agri businesses, typically on the input side, or those who are involved in commodities on the output side, they also have win-win situation along with the government and the farmers. So we need to have a collaborative ecosystem where everybody is able to contribute in ensuring the food security of the world. And last but not least, it has to be profitable, especially for the farmers. Unfortunately, we have seen years and years and years that farmers are not profitable in their endeavor, and that creates a lot of challenges, especially when we talk about small and marginal farmers who are critical food security. They are losing interest in agriculture because they are not having profitability when they're doing agricultural activities. Yeah. So now this is actually it predominantly shows how farmer perceives, right, the past, present, and future. So in the past 19th century, they were having very rudimentary technology, or I'll say that tools to do farming, but the farmers that time were actually profitable. So if you see that in 19th century, farmers were far more profitable than the farmers of today. With all the technology which we talk about, we have been able to deliver to the farmer. So in 1960s, we went to them and we said that the green revolution will increase your income because it will increase your productivity. But we have seen that the substantial fall in the prices of the commodity, farmers have not been able to be more profitable even after the green revolution, in which we increase or we promoted the use of fertilizers to the farmers. And then in 1980s, we again went to them and we said that, hey, to increase further the productivity and feed the world, we need to have the GMO crops. While India has been the forefront of adoption of GMO, but many countries adopted GMO and their productivity increases. But again, we found that as the commodity prices were pretty low, the farmers were not able to make money. While because of the GMO and the green revolution, the cost of doing farming increased substantially. Then in late 2000, we had mechanization revolution where we started asking farmer to use more tractors, more harvesters, so that the labor-intensive activities can be done by machines and hence increase the productivity. So again, that happened. So farmer today, if you ask me, when he sees the past, he said that actually 3 times promises were made to me that I'll become more profitable. But unfortunately, my incomes has remained stagnant. At the same time, my cost of cultivation or doing the farming activities has increased substantially, leading for me to have far lower profit today than what I used to get in 19th century. Similarly, if you just compare the price of gold to price of wheat, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So present again, when we talk about digital technology and we go to the farmers and tell him that actually, hey, why don't you use drones, sensors, satellite, weather-based information, to decide about your agriculture practices? He's confused because he sees too many technologies being talked about. At the same time, he's not able to see the value of these technologies being delivered to him in form of more money to him as a profit, at the same time improving his overall lifestyle. So this is where actually we find the challenge of adoption of digital technology when it comes to at the grassroots level by the farmers. Going forward in the future, I believe the way forward would be to make technology typically invisible to the farmer. So they should not care about whether we are using drones or sensors or satellite or whatever, right? They should be able to get actionable insight. So somebody is able to tell them what to do tomorrow in their farm, irrespective of what is behind that black box of so-called technology. So farmer should not be worried about that, but he should be able to get data-driven decision making, which increases his value proposition as well as the profitability. At the same time, I also see that we'll also see a shift towards vertical farms, especially when we talk about perishables. So more and more perishables within the urban area would be coming from a radius of around 50 kilometers, where you'll find that there would be urban farming in form of aeroponics or hydroponics or aquaponics. And we also see a substantial number of farmers moving towards organic, using more biofertilizers, biopesticide, biostimulant. At the same time, also looking at reducing the cost of cultivation by reducing the application of pesticides, fertilizers, etc. For two reasons. One is that actually it is good for health, it is good for soil, and at the same time, it reduces cost of cultivation for the farmers. So if you see that modern agriculture is aggregate of too many complex activities, and that is also one of the reasons we see that the scalability of technology, or especially digital technology, in agriculture has been slow, unlike when we talk about enterprise and banking or governance, because there are too many complex value chains, whether we are talking about upstream or downstream. So in downstream, you see that, like, there is a complete different value chain, how the seeds are produced, how the seeds are packaged, how they are distributed, and how they reach end of the day to the farmers. And at the same time, we talk about other inputs, whether it is pesticides, fertilizers, or bio fertilizers, or biopesticides, or biologicals. All of them, they have a very different complex value chains. And at all the level, like, you need to collect the data, and those data and that information can lead to a lot of insight. But collecting data of so many different varied value chains, when we talk about downstream, is a challenge. Then there is a lot of activity on farm itself, right? From the land preparation all the way to the harvesting. There are multiple activities involved across the crop cycle. So, like, how the seeding is being done. Is it direct seeding, whether it is transplantation, or whether it is a perennial crop, it is a non-perennial crop. So all value chains have their own complexities, even on the farm gate, not just upstream. Similarly, like, activities related to, like, how much application of a specific inputs needs to be done, what should be the seed rates, what should be the total application of fertilizers. And that is also again backed or based on a lot of other information which a farmer needs. For example, like, what is their condition of soil, what is their organic carbon, what is the total availability of nitrogen or potassium and phosphorus in their soil. Based on that, deciding how much fertilizer to put. And similarly, once the, like, crops start germinating, all the way to harvest, like, what is the, whether there is a nutritional deficiency, whether it is a pest stress, whether it is stress because of climatic condition. For example, as I said, like, wheat last year, or before that, the previous to last year, we found severe heat stress reducing productivity of the farmer for the wheat. So all those things on farm activity also need to have, is also having a lot of information and data will need to be collected to come out with the right prescription. And then post farm gate, there is value chain which have a lot of aggregators, retailers, and typically the wholesalers. And finally, like an end user who consume directly, like us, or could be the food processing industry, which uses all the agriculture commodities or produce to come out with a product which we are able to consume. And then you are having hotels and restaurant chain, which again, like, buy a lot of these agriculture produce either directly to the farmer through intermediaries, and then are able to deliver food, which is typically, like, ready to eat food. So you'll find that, like, I've tried to take the minimum time to explain you what is the complexity of when we talk about agriculture, because of the various value chains and activities going all across upstream, downstream, and on farm. Now let's understand a little bit of agriculture ecosystem. So unlike in past, it has also evolved substantially. So if you see, like, a few decades back, we used to have a farmers, we used to have an aggregator, we used to have input companies, and then we used to have government to make policy, and the end user. Now the agriculture ecosystem has become hugely complex, diverse, with multiple stakeholders. So from agriculture input companies, that too of multiple types, biological or chemical based, the seed companies, and in biologicals or the chemical base also, we have fertilizer companies, we are having pesticide companies, we are having stimulant or, like, micronutrient enablement companies. So again, agriculture input companies also have, like, too many diversified players. Then we have cooperatives, and what is known as in India predominantly the FPOs or FPCs, that is farmer producer organizations, where the multiple farmers come together and produce. Then we have a new breed of players coming in, the agtech companies, which either on biological side or on digital side are creating solution for the farmer to enable them to produce more and have better integration with the value chain, both upstream and downstream. Then we have extension service providers. Now these are players who could be through NGOs, through government, or through the input companies, which have their field force to advise farmers on the ground. We are also seeing that a lot of corporate farming happening all across the world. And we are seeing that also happening in India, for example, like, when we talk about McCain's or Pepsi, who are trying to produce tomatoes and potatoes in India. And these type of companies actually are involved in either contract or corporate farming, where they are involved end-to-end with the farmers for the production. Then we also have seen that insurance and risk mitigation players. So for example, in India also we are seeing now both public sector and private sector becoming part of insurance. So in public sector, we already have Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and then we are having some private players also getting into providing parametric or parameter-based insurance, which is easier for farmers to use. Then we are having commodity buyers, which are very critical. So companies like Olams and Cargills of the world who buy commodities and uh, typically they either do the trading of it, or they also keep it so that all across the year you are having a supply of commodities for the end users. Then, as I explained you, there are NGOs who try to work with the farmers with not any interest of profit, but enable farmers. Then the government, which enables policy making, and also now banks and financial institutions, because credit is very, very important when it comes to farmers, for very simple reason. Uh, if farmer doesn't get credit at the right time, then there is a challenge, because for them, from the planning of their crop, they need to buy inputs. They need to take care of, in case the prices are low, to also store their produce, and for that they need financing. So again, here we see that public and private players both playing a very important role. And as per various studies, it has been found that if credit is available to farmer at the right time, their productivity increases by as much as 10%. Now all these players, they would have a common agenda or common goal, that how we can produce more crop per drop of water, per dollar or per rupee of input or on farm cost, and per acre of land use. So all of them, you'll find that engage with the farmer who is at the center, because he is responsible to actually produce the crop. And then you have multiple technologies, which you can see that artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, cloud, agronomy, drones and satellite, IoT, all playing a very vital role to ensure that farmer get right information. At the same time, different stakeholders, from financial institution to insurance companies to extension providers to the commodity buyers and input companies, NGOs and government, all have access to right sort of information in hand to make decisions which are very critical for the overall agriculture ecosystem. Now, a lot of people say that actually data is the new oil. I actually have changed it, because oil typically use it once, right? And that it got exhausted. But I believe data is a new soil, because as I was telling you, different stakeholders can use the same data for interpreting their own decision. For example, the forecast of weather can tell a farmer when to start his agriculture or farming activity. At the same time, it can tell a financial institution that there is a higher or lower risk of doing funding to the farmer this year, or for a commodity player to decide how much production would be available, so that they can plan at what price and when they need to liquidate whatever stock they want to buy or sell. Or for example, government to make a decision about whether to allow export or allow import, and other exempt policies. At the same time, also decide the prices of the produce itself, which we call, quote unquote, in India, the minimum support prices. So you'll find that the same data can be used by different players. So just like soil, in which depending on the seed you have sown, you will get a crop. Same way, different stakeholders with the same data can have their own insight to make their own decisions. So if we see that, what are the typical data involved in agriculture? So you see that first is the farmer demographics, then the farm profile, the crop cycle itself, the farming activities, financial transaction, and consumption and usage. So these are the six basket in which you'll find that agriculture and food related data is all about. And if you have all these data, then we can enable different ecosystem stakeholders to make a better informed data driven decisions. Now we are already seeing that there is a data deluge which is enabling smart agriculture. So when I say data deluge, one of the biggest challenge in agriculture is that the cost of collecting data has been very high. Now, as we move forward, we are seeing that reducing, but still collecting data at the grassroots level is a challenge, and it is a cost position. So it's very important we know what to collect, what data to collect. So we are already seeing that, through remote sensing, whether it is satellite-based imagery or it is imagery coming from the drone, a lot of remote sensing data is being created. Then we are having in last 6-7 years a lot of mobile based application to ensure a farmer understand his farm, or what we call integrated farm management systems, have been deployed across the globe, including in India. And those type of applications are also generating a substantial amount of data. Then we are having the sensors being put on typically your farm itself, to understand what is the moisture, what is the nutrient availability, and at the same time, what are the temperatures of the soil. And based on that information, which goes to cloud, you are able to do something which is called precision agriculture. So you'll know that exactly in which part of your farm you are having either a stress or you are having challenge related to lack of moisture, lack of nutrient, impact of specific type of pest. So all those things lead to application of inputs in a very precise way, and the precision agriculture also collect a lot of information through on-ground tools. For example, we are having those smart tractors which are having GPS, which are having all the sensors and all the information coming from the tractors going to the cloud itself. And then you are having typically the fifth type of information, which is happening predominantly both at the farm as well as in research labs, which is called genetics. So typically, more and more players, including the government and private sector, they're trying to decode the genetics of different crops which actually we cultivate. So once we understand the genetics of the crop, we are able to improve the seed quality. We are able to get those crops which are heat tolerant, which are salinity tolerant, which are able to grow with minimum or limited resources. And if you know that we talk about a new technology in genetics or biotech, which is known as CRISPR-Cas, which is genetic editing of the crop. So which is fortunately India has said that they don't consider the genetically edited crop as GMO crop. So that enables use of modern genetics to increase the total yields at the grassroots level. Now let's understand a little bit about the agriculture data. Because any digitization have at the core its data, and at the core of agriculture data is 5 V's. So one is the volume. So we are having substantial amount of volumes of data coming in for a very simple reason that when we approach agriculture, the activities are so humongous, right? And the scale of activities are so huge that the total data generated is in multiple petabytes. So for example, if I just want to use a Sentinel satellite-based imagery to cover whole of Earth and all the farms, I'm already talking about roughly close to 100,000 petabytes of data, right? And that can be produced on a daily basis. Second is the variety of data. So when we talk about agriculture, the data is coming from mobile applications, it is coming from sensors, it is coming from imagery, typically whether it is multispectral imagery or it is high resolution imagery from satellites and drones. And then you are having data coming from different public open databases about the number of farmers, their demographic profiles, where they reside, what is the size of their farm. So all that leads to a very complex variety of data, which is structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. Then we have to understand the veracity. Unlike in other activities, for example, if Google Maps gives you wrong location, right, you might end up wasting 10-15 minutes. That's all, right? But if you have wrong data being fed to a farmer, right, and which changes his date of sowing, or it changes how much irrigation he should do, you're talking about the severe loss to the farmer. At the same time, also reduction in the productivity, which might eventually, if at the larger scale, lead to the food security challenges. Which was example is again back home in India. In last year, we have said that we will be feeding the world with the amount of wheat which we produce, because typically we consume 100 to 105 million metric tons of wheat, and our estimate was that we will be producing 130 million metric tons. So that gave us buffer that actually we can easily export between roughly 7 to 10 million metric tons. But eventually we found that data was erroneous. And we found that on the ground, the productivity would lead us to be sub 100 million metric tons, which is 5 million less than what we consume. So immediately we have to ban the export, which lead to a lot of losses to the farmer, because the price eventually domestic market crash. So it is very important that we understand the veracity of the data is of utmost important when it comes to digital agriculture, when it comes to agriculture data. Then the velocity of data. So some of the sensors we are talking about, that they transmit data every minute, huge amount of data is being sent about the condition of the soil, about the wind velocities, about temperatures, etc., etc. So again, we are seeing that there is a humongous velocity. So at the real-time basis, a lot of data is being sent across when it comes to agriculture data. And last but not least, I believe while the remaining four could be relevant to most of the other sectors as well, the fifth one is of huge importance. As I said, collecting data in agriculture is a very, very costly proposition, right? Because of scatteredness of the farm, the scale of the farms, number of farmers, different agroclimatical zone, different type of activities happening at different times. So hence, it is very important that we understand what is the data we want to collect, what is the data we want to aggregate, and what is the data we want to analyze. And hence, it is very important that we ascertain what is the value of the data being collected by us, which also makes it the last of the V's of the 5 V's. So any agriculture data project, right, you have to be very clear about these 5 V's before moving forward. Now let us understand a little, sorry. Yeah, so now let us understand what, according to me, right, are the 3 trends which are shaping today and tomorrow of agriculture when it comes to the digital perspective. So one is the blockchain. So blockchain is a technology which makes your different value chains immutable. That means actually, like, they are more transparent and they ensure the fairness of the trade. At the same time, it also collects a lot of information which can be further analyzed. Second technology, which digital technology, which I believe is disruptive when it comes to agriculture, is use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, it is very difficult for a farmers to, like, be able to see whole of his field and identify which are the pockets of distress when it comes to the crop. AI and ML tools can be used to ensure that actually we identify which are the problematic area in a specific farm, address to that. Similarly, AI and ML can be used to predict the prices. AI and ML tools can be used to identify what are the pests which are impacting the crop. At the same time, also predict what is a possible pest which could impact your crop, and we can take a preventive measures. So AI and ML plays a very vital role going forward when it comes to agriculture. And last but not least, Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things is a loose term where actually, like, using sensors which are connected to the cloud, that is just connected to internet. And we'll see that in future, a lot of farmers will not be just sowing seeds, but they will also be sowing typically, like, the sensors. So these are the typically, like, when we talk about the market potential of digital agriculture. So one of the reason actually, like, we believe that digital agriculture is going to pick up very fast is because of the market size. India is a huge market. The growth potential is substantial because a lot of farmers are still not adopting these technologies, and there is a possibility of a lot of farmers adopt these technology. Number of farmers, obviously, like, as I said, 130 million of them. Agriculture economics. So India is a predominantly agriculture dominated country with 16% of GDP coming from agriculture. So again, there is a huge amount of value if we are able to make agriculture more efficient. A policy environment. So we have seen, being a democracy and the farmers being the big vote bank, the government policy are generally with the intent of helping farmers. At the same time, because again, we are democracy, we don't want price to be on very higher side. There is also at the consumer side policy intervention. Then the agronomy, we are having multiple agroclimatical zone. India can produce close to 700 different value chains. We are having a strong digital infrastructure, which is visible because we are having far more people connected to mobile as well as internet when we compare to the rest of the world. At the same time, cost of in access to internet is also very low. We are a politically stable country. The farmer demographics, we are having among the youngest of the farmers in global south. There is a funding availability for those who are innovating in agriculture. In the like, India agri-tech startup, they have raised close to $3 billion over past few years itself. So there is a money there, and the digitization cost is low. And finally, we are having a very robust ecosystem. Now, this is how a typical digital agriculture architecture is all about. So you collect data from the farm, public data, then there is a proxy data, then there is a transactional data. All of that can be used in big data analytics or directly giving actionable insight. Or if you want to do simulation, you use artificial intelligence and machine learning engines to give you actionable insight. Finally, for helping farmer to decide what to grow, when to grow, and how to grow. So data-driven decision making in agriculture, they have, like, as I said, public data sources, for example, for weather and climate, soil databases, crop models, market information, agro input data sheet, best practices inventories, and farmer information. Similarly, we have a lot of proprietary data, which comes from local sensors for soil, weather, and crop variety, yield databases, private inventories, remote sensing images, input prices, yield maps, and all of them, if they put into decision models, are evaluated as an algorithms like integrated farm models or risk assessment models or farm optimization model. We are able to create a data-driven decision making in agriculture for different stakeholders. Now, because of lack of time, I'll just straight away come to this very important slide. So a lot of people say that actually, like, this data or digitization is only a pipe dream. I myself have been involved in a project actually which started way back in 2017. So we worked with farmers in Sabarkantha district of Gujarat, close to 3,000 farmers, and the commodity was potato and groundnut. And we have seen that in the first year itself, like, because of digitization, the productivity increased by 18% and over 5 years by 51%. And similarly, increase in profitability of cost of cultivation, which is the last part, also reduced from 10% in first year to 58% in the fifth year. So overall increase in profitability was 34% in the first year itself and 108%. So eventually you can always say that when your profitability increased by 108%, that we have been able to double the farmer income in 5 years, especially for the farmers who work with us in Sabarkantha in Gujarat. Now, these are some of the use cases: crop farm monitoring, traceability, farm automation, finance and credit, and recommendation engines. And these are some of the international players. So if you get time, please Google these companies and see to it that actually you are able to identify that and type of work they're doing. For example, ITK does a lot of work when it comes to digital-based intelligence for the farmer. Plantix gives you visibility of what pest would have impacted your crop. OneSoil provides you how your crop is actually, or your soil is at the farm gate level. Zavi provide you how the farm is shaping up, whether it is growing good or not. Phytech provides you at the grassroots level exactly for each plant itself, what is the condition. Blue River helps you in identifying if there is weeds and automatically remove the weeds using laser technology. Similarly, in India, you'll find that for same, you have got companies like Cropin, AgroStar, Statsure, Stalep, Samunati, TraceX, which are doing pretty interesting work when it comes to digital agriculture. Now, these are some of the top solutions you'll find in agriculture. That is output aggregation, risk mitigation, insurance, traceability, smart irrigation, digital payments, farm management, marketplace, input e-commerce, yield estimation, farm credit and loan management, crop stress detection and advisory, farm data monetization. These are some of the, you'll find that top 12 solution when it comes to digital agriculture in India. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. I hope all of you would have learned something. I'm always available on LinkedIn. You can connect with me, and in case you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, even after end of this very interesting engagement, which we will be having through some of the questions you would be asking. With that, to the moderator, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak Pareek, for the presentation and detailed talk. Now I will take up some questions. So the first question is, what factors should be considered when selecting crops for a specific season?
Right. So see, it's very important. First of all, we need to understand historical data, especially last 5 years of how the weather has been. Right. So based on that, first would be your agroclimatical zone, the typically weather profile for past 4 to 5 years. Then actually the pricing of that specific commodity. Now that is also very important, because the end of the day, farmer wants to be profitable. So you need to see the historical price for the last 3 seasons, that actually what has been the prices and how they have moved, what time of the year the prices were high. So it should match with your harvest. So if you are able to harvest your crop at the time, grow those variety. For example, if you are having cultivating PGNP, then you have to need to understand that actually which variety you should be growing, so that you are able to harvest at the time when the prices generally are high. So all those consideration, I think, is very important. Then you also need to consider the type of the farm you're having, because every farm, irrespective of which region it is very different. So what is the the organic carbon content of your soil? What is the availability of different nutrients in your soil? Whether your soil is acidic, alkaline, what is the slope of your soil? So all those parameters need to be considered before deciding which crop to be cultivating. So it's a complex process. Unfortunately, farmers don't do that. They would based on the price of the previous season. If the last year the price of onion was high, everybody would like to grow onion. Or if last year the price of pigeon pea was high, they would grow a pigeon pea. Other factor I've seen that farmers take care of is mostly is the previous year monsoon. So I believe they need to see far more parameters than 2 or 3 parameters generally currently they are using.
Okay. And next question, what soil parameters should be analyzed to make informed decisions about crop selection?
Right. See, one thing we have to understand is that, the biggest parameter is type of soil you are having, right? So whether it is clay soil, it is loamy soil, it is sandy soil. So type of the soil. Secondly, you should always get your soil tested. It is very important. It will give the nutrient profile of your soil. That will also give you other information, for example, electrical conductivity, the pH of your soil, which will provide you sufficient information about deciding which crop to grow. Because you might end up growing a crop which is not very effective in the type of soil you're having, just based on the price assumption and based on what other farmers in the vicinity are growing. We end up deciding a wrong crop. And even it's just not about the crop. Once you have decided the crop, which variety, right? That is also very, very important. So which variety of crop, for example, if you are growing rice, which specific pusa variety you are growing, that will make a huge impact in overall profitability which you will be having. So I believe these parameters are very important. I also believe you need to also check what is the organic carbon available in your soil, and what is water retention property. But that adds up to the cost of doing the testing of the soil. But if you can at least every 3 years or 4 years get a complete profile of your soil. And nowadays there are a lot of good tools available. So again, unlike in past when the soil testing was only done by the government, and it was a painful process because they would take sample from one specific farm, and they would give soil health card to 10 people who are in the vicinity. Now we are already having technology which makes the soil testing for majority of the parameters at the cost of 300 to 500 rupees, and you don't even need to send your sample all the way to the agriculture university or KVKs. It can be done within your village, right? It can be done sometime within your farm itself. So I believe you should look at uh, soil testing as one of the fundamental first activity a farmer should do, because you have to understand that if you are able to understand your soil, you'll grow right crop, you'll grow right variety, and also how much specific input needs to be put in that. It will save huge amount of cost on your fertilizer if you are able to have a good understanding of the soil you are having. So I am a strong believer that actually every farmer should get his soil tested. And now the cost of soil testing has gone low substantially. And I can name some of the companies. For example, there is a company called Absolute, which is having one of the gold standard machine, which hardly costs 80 to 90,000 rupees, which can be put in a village, and per test cost would be roughly 300 rupees. So those type of innovations, I believe, will help humongously to the farmer to decide the right crop, to decide right practices. At the same time, also ensure that actually, they are making their farming more sustainable.
Next question. How can soil health data contribute to optimizing fertilizer and irrigation strategies?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't get the question.
Yeah. How can soil health data contribute to optimizing fertilizer and irrigation strategies?
Perfect. So as I was telling you, now if you are able to have all the 13 to 15 parameters about your soil, you know exactly whether your soil is deficient of nitrogen or of phosphorus, or of iron or of sulfur. So once you are able to identify what is the deficiency, you only focus on application of those nutrients. So you are able to calculate exactly what is the requirement for urea or a single or double phosphate or potash or sulfur, which is required by your farm. And once you only apply that, because over fertigation also leads to reduction in typically yields. At the same time, you're spending more money in buying those costly fertilizers. Going forward, the cost of fertilizers is going to increase, right? We are already seeing that even the subsidized fertilizers, the prices increase. At the same time, the total availability of those fertilizers has always been challenged when actually it is a sowing time. I see, it is very important that based on whatever the soil information you are able to get, you should apply it, because I've seen a lot of farmers, even if once they get the soil testing done. But yes, it is very important that the soil testing has to be done by in a reliable way, right? It cannot be in a ad hoc manner. And if you have got a reliable soil testing done, I believe it will help you in identification, at least of the nutrient. That's the one part of it. Second part of it is that actually, by putting very cheap soil moisture devices, you'll be able to find in different part of your farm what is the moisture level. Because again, just where the over fertigation can reduce the yield, erratic irrigation can also reduce your yields. So if you are a farmer who is lucky enough to be having drip irrigation or sprinkler based irrigation, I believe spend a little bit more and put some sensors also in your farm, so that you are able to identify when the moisture is low, only then the irrigation is done.
Okay. And related to the same, are there technologies available for real-time soil monitoring?
So it is impossible to do real-time soil monitoring except few parameters, including soil moisture. That can be done through remote sensing. But if you ask me, when we compare the cost versus benefit analysis, then actually, taking testing the soil just before the land preparation, right? One time in the middle, and then one time towards I'll say that before harvest. That would be good enough. Even doing the soil testing only just before you start the typically land preparation phase itself would also help. So you don't need the soil information except for the moisture and electrical conductivity and the pH, right? The rest of it can very easily be done through the soil testing once. Now, regarding another three parameters, there are definitely very cheap tools available where you put this probe in your soil and you'll be able to get the pH, you'll be able to get the moisture, and you'll be also able to get the electrical conductivity. So yes, real time is possible, but you don't need all the data real time. So some of the data you test it once or twice and then take decision based on that.
Okay. And how can data-driven decisions help in optimizing the use of water resources for irrigation?
See, India, one of the biggest challenges is that abuse of water, right? So we have seen that in southern peninsula, this time the rain has been erratic, and you find a lot of challenges because the level of water is pretty low. Even though southern peninsula is most irrigated, it's not too much dependent on rain-fed, but irrigated. So wherever actually we are having irrigated land, it's very important that we conserve water resources. And one thing is using technology for sure. As I said, the best technology which I believe have been there for decades is drip irrigation. So irrespective of the crop you are growing, definitely you should spend money or you should invest in drip irrigation. It saves a lot of water and also increase your productivity for sure. That's one. Secondly, then if you have a little bit more money, then actually enable that drip irrigation with sensors so that you can automate the whole irrigation process itself. Third, which is I believe is not more of, I'll say, the digital technology or typically the technology on ground, more of the practices. Like for example, we have been doing the flood-based irrigation for rice for decades, and the rice is not a crop which is actually too much dependent on the flooding. The flooding is not required, so we can do alternative drying and wetting mechanism. You can do direct transplantation or direct seeding of the rice. You can also do drip irrigation in rice. In fact, I have seen one great project which was in Thailand, known as Nama, where actually they've been able to increase the productivity as well as reduce the total water use for rice by as much as 75 to 80%. So we need to adopt new agriculture practices as well, and that is very critical because over irrigation is not just about the wastage of water, but it also releases a lot of greenhouse gases, specifically methane in environment, which leads to the climate change impact. So I believe new technologies need to be adopted by the farmers. Yes, the $1 million question is that the cost of those technologies. I believe good models can be created by involving the public-private partnerships. It can be where the government can, well, they already have a lot of projects or a lot of subsidies when it comes to the drip irrigation, sprinkler-based irrigation. But I believe they should also give subsidies for the maintenance of that, because farmer would use subsidy to put all these drip irrigation also that infrastructure in their farm, but because the 30% of the recurring cost, they are not able to take care of it from second or third or fourth season, they stop using drip irrigation. So I believe it's very important that there is a subsidization or alternative business model need to be created by the public and private sector so that more and more farmers are able to adopt these water saving technologies.
Okay. Can data analytics assist in minimizing waste and maximizing resource utilization?
Yes, see, data is a very important tool for you to plan complete logistics, right? So in India, if you see that when we talk about perishables, typically there is a value loss of 30%, right, from the farm gate to the fork when it comes to perishable. Now, one of the reasons that actually there is the challenge of reduced quality or suboptimal quality when the produce reaches the sale point, right, through the mandis, through the ardiyas, through the aggregation, right, and lack of physical infrastructure in country like India, whether it's about cold storages or the dry storages. Here, the data can enable you to create better logistical mechanism where you are able to deliver product by reducing the total turnaround time from farm gate all the way to the fork. And this is where I believe data can definitely reduce the wastage of finished product. Now, when it comes to optimization of application, I've already told you precision agriculture is one of the way where you can reduce substantially the total water as well as fertilizer or nutrient availability or application on your farms. So on the both side, reducing waste, definitely digital analytics can play a very vital role. At the same time, reducing the cost of cultivation by reducing the total available use of inputs, that can also be achieved by data analytics. So yes, data analytics can take care of both the needs of the farmer.
Okay. And how do insurance and financial tools based on data analysis help in risk management?
Right. So, see, for example, when we talk about the predominant insurance being given in India, which is known as Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, they rely very heavily on crop cutting experiments, right? And then they are typically taluka based. So, a specific taluka need to be declared as drought prone or flood infested, and then only you are eligible for the insurance, because we don't have access to the on per farm basis, right, of data. Now, digital technology, specifically the remote sensing technologies, can be used to typically eliminate the requirement of crop cutting experiment, hence reducing the cost of delivery of insurance itself. Secondly, it can give you micro level data on per farm basis. So now you will be more equipped in ensuring that you are able to give compensation to a farmer if his farm is getting impacted, rather than depending on the larger mass of a taluka or a village having challenges because of weather. The third type of insurance which are now coming up is known as parametric insurance, where actually farmer pays the premium, and based on historical data, there is an average rainfall which is being, or average heat, or uh, all weather related information is already available, and based on that it is benchmarked. So if there is more than 10 to 15% variation in whether the rainfall, the total number of warm days, the number of cold days, of frost, etc., which again can be very easily be ascertained using remote sensing, you are able to provide a farmer immediately the compensation just based on, in case a parameter has been more than plus minus 10%, 15%, 20%, depending on your insurance policy. So this is how the data analytics or digitization is helping in making insurance more affordable, cheaper, more efficient, at the same time accessible to more and more farmers, also at a granular level. Now, coming to the financial or credit part of it, now it is very difficult for any financial institution to fund a farmer or to give credit to a farmer, because it is very difficult to monitor a farmer, whether he's doing the activity or not, whether what he has taken money for example, the crop insurance, or sorry, crop loan, is he applying all that money for farming, or is he using it for different purposes? All of those things can be monitored using remote sensing. So I can see whether a farmer is doing cultivation or not, or I can have a historical data of the farmer, whether he has done the cultivation in past 5 years, how was his farm, was the farm good or bad. Today, actually, there is no incentive for farmer to be a good farmer, right? So I get the credit at the same interest rate if I'm a bad farmer. I also get the credit at the same interest rate if I'm a good farmer. Here, actually, based on the data availability, you are able to give incentive to good farmer, because your risk has now gone down. So you can offer interest rate which are lower for the farmers for 5 years who have been doing farming in a very, very progressive manner, while you put a little bit of I'll say that disincentivization of the farmers who are not doing farming in a great manner. Similarly, as you are able to monitor farms remotely through remote sensing, it reduces your cost of maintaining a farmer. And last but not least, you also know actually when he'll be harvesting it, or in case something goes wrong. As a financial institution, you already know that actually 30% of my farmers would be having yields lower than what is expected. So I can in my books put a provision for that. So that makes credit process easier, better, efficient for both the financial institution, and hence they can pass on some of those benefits to the farmer by reducing their cost of credit. So this is how I believe more and more financial institutions would be using digital tools to reach out to more farmers in a cost effective manner and give them more products.
Okay. And next question is, are there user-friendly apps or tools that farmers can use to access and integrate relevant agricultural data?
Yeah, so you find a lot of private and public players, they already have an application. In fact, you guys can look at a application known as Upaj, right? I found it to be very, very appealing and very robust application, which can provide you one-stop solution about your soil health. It can provide you agronomical advisory. It can provide you a lot of information about how, you can raise financing. And also, Upaj provides you option of getting your farm insured. So those type of application are there, and other than Upaj, you also have a lot of government-based application depending on which part of India you live. So there is a good applications in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, where they call it I forget, but it starts with Raitu. So you can download those applications and then use that. In fact, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, Government of India is also having some of the application. In fact, very recently they have come with a portal also, which will provide a lot of data, right? It's not an application, but there is a portal where you can get a lot of data on the pricing, on current sowing stages and etc., which can make a farmer take a decision and whether actually what crop to grow based on the financial models. So yes, there are tools and applications available.
Okay. And now it's about the government policy. How do government policies and subsidies factor into decision-making process for crop selection?
That's an unfortunate reality in India. Actually, farmers like to grow those crops where their MSP is already being promoted by the government, and that also varies from state to state. So farmers in Punjab and Haryana will continue growing paddy irrespective of water table going down, irrespective of their soil not supporting higher productivity of paddy, but still they'll keep on growing because substantial amount of paddy is procured from typically Punjab, Haryana, Western UP and a part of Eastern UP. So you'll keep see that farmers keep on doing that. Second, when I talk about drip irrigation again, a lot of farmers would typically adopt drip irrigation for 1-2 years because there is a subsidy, and after that they just dump the drip irrigation because the add-on maintenance cost is not being provided by the government, right? So yes, the government policies plays a very vital role in farmer deciding what crop to cultivate, which I believe is not a healthy practice going forward. We need to change that, but this is how it is. I don't see that changing, but I am optimistic it should change.
Okay. Last question. Yeah. How do government policies and subsidies, yeah, you already answered. How can farmers stay informed about government support programs through data-driven channels?
Wait for the elections. Election, everybody comes and says that actually what policies they are bringing.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm pretty sure farmers in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Mizoram, and Telangana, they would be now getting a lot of digital downloads on their WhatsApp, on their phone calls, right? And in case some of them they're on social media like Facebook, they'll be getting a lot of bombardment of what the government policies are already.
Right. Any other, genuine thing?
See, I've not seen very structured way and dissemination of this information. In fact, I've been regularly seeing full page ads in an English newspaper talking about the scheme for the farmers. I don't know which farmer is reading Economic Times, right, to understand what are the policies of the government. That's an unfortunate reality of the nation. But I believe, the best way would be farmers' local representative, typically the Gram Panchayat should be dissemination of this information should be happening. But I have not seen too many of them doing that. Similarly, we have extension workers through Atma, which should be providing all this government information or the policy information to the farmers. But again, easier said than done. It's not efficient. I think India's extension at the grassroots level is very poor. That is why, in a lot of government policies, while they are on the papers, they don't get implemented.
Okay, Mr. Deepak, I don't see any more questions on participants. So now we have come to end of question round. On behalf of agricultureinformation.com, we'd like to thank you for the detailed presentation and actually very interesting. And we also like to thank all the participants for joining this meeting. The meeting is now closed. Have a good and safe weekend.
Thank you.
Thank
Same
you.
to you. Take
Namaste.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.